Israel's ambassador to the United States declares that Israel will deal with the Egyptian army's preparations in Sinai as it is intolerable. This is the first official statement on the matter from an Israeli official, and it begs the question of whether Egypt is already violating the Camp David Accords peace treaty. If so, is a war really underway between Israel and Egypt, or is everything exaggerated? We'll go into the details. In related news, a senior Egyptian official who was interviewed by the Lebanese newspaper El Akhbar dropped a bombshell and said that the Arab mediators in the deal with Hamas do not want the release of all the hostages unless an agreed path is found to avoid the renewal of the war. In other words, Egypt and Qatar do not want all the hostages to be freed. Meanwhile, in Israel, talk is being turned into action as the Ministry of Defense has established a directorate for voluntary immigration of Gazan residents outside of the Gaza Strip. A new government plan will help Palestinians immigrate by sea, air, and land to third countries if they wish to do so. As part of the ceasefire agreement, Israel is preparing for the possible return of the remains of 4 hostages who died in captivity. However, on Saturday, 3 live hostages are expected to be released, and Israel is demanding that 6 from the Phase A's list be freed in exchange for bringing hundreds of caravans or small mobile homes into the Gaza Strip. The IDF says that it has not yet received the names of the next batch of hostages to be released or how many will return to Israel, as the political echelon has not passed on the date and the location for their return. And meanwhile, the IDF continues eliminating terrorists, including a senior Hamas field operative who was eliminated in broad daylight in Lebanon. And speaking of Lebanon, after Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem threatened and bragged the head of the IDF's withdrawal from Lebanon today, the IDF revealed the 5 positions it would continue to hold with American agreement until it becomes clear that Hezbollah will not return south of the Litani. In a related story, Lebanon has indefinitely extended the ban on flights from Iran due to Israeli warnings about smuggling cash for Hezbollah. Hezbollah supporters are furious at the situation and have rioted in areas around the airport for several days. The battle against terrorism in northern Samaria also continues this week, with 13 suspects arrested and large quantities of weapons, ammunition, and currency confiscated in a series of raids, while another terrorist attack was thwarted just hours before it was meant to occur. And finally, America's National Security Advisor reiterates that all options are on the table against Iran, in a sign that the Trump administration is hardening its stance towards the Islamic Republic. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 501 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in the region, and all the armed groups that are supported and directed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps of Iran, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I'd like to invite you to press that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. We begin our report with the assassination of a senior Hamas figure following reports of an airstrike on a car in Sidon in Lebanon. According to reports in Saudi media portals, the target of the strike was Muhammad Shaheen, head of the operation departments of the Hamas terrorist organization in Lebanon. Shortly after the reports surfaced, Hamas confirmed his death. The IDF and the Shin Bet issued a statement confirming that Israeli Air Force aircrafts struck in Sidon under Shin Bet direction. The statement continued by explaining that Shaheen was targeted after he recently engaged in advancing terror plans with Iranian guidance and funding from Lebanese territory against citizens of the State of Israel. Shaheen was a central knowledge focal point in the organization, and during the war he was engaged in promoting various terrorist plans, particularly in rocket fire towards the Israeli home front. The Air Force's actions in the last few days in Lebanon were meant to convey firm messages to Hezbollah and to the Iranian-led Axis, as the IDF statement continued by saying, "We will not allow Hezbollah to rebuild its strength, not to operate as a military force, and not to threaten Israel." This was only one of the actions that Israel carried out on Sunday in Lebanon. The Air Force also attacked rocket launchers and other weapons in Lebanese territory that the intelligence echelon had determined were placed by Hezbollah as part of a plan to attack Israel at some future date. In a statement from the IDF spokesperson on Monday, it was said, among other things, activity by terror operatives at these sites constitute a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. The IDF continues to act to remove any threat to the state of Israel. By the end of the day on Tuesday, that is today, the IDF was supposed to leave all areas in southern Lebanon that it holds and deploy on the Blue Line, which is the de facto border between Israel and Lebanon. However, in recent days, the IDF has been undertaking aggressive actions to clarify Hezbollah that Israel is determined to prevent the organization from rebuilding and again becoming a military threat against Israel and this region. According to the plan, which has American approval, Israel is deploying a force along the border 3 times the size of what was there before the war began. In addition, 5 positions inside the Lebanese territory where the Lebanese National Army has not yet deployed will remain under IDF control until it can be determined that Hezbollah is not going to reoccupy them. These 5 outposts will provide a better defensive response beyond the border for an extended period. This is according to the IDF assessments. The IDF also said that the mechanisms with the United States and Lebanon is working, and the Lebanese army is enforcing governments in Beirut on the Syria-Lebanon border and in the south of the country. According to military sources, in places where the Lebanese army does not operate, the IDF operates and will handle every violation. Earlier, the IDF announced that a tunnel in southern Lebanon belonging to the Radwan force of Hezbollah was destroyed. The tunnel was tens of meters long and contained rooms for habitation and combat equipment. It was also stated that the forces completed dozens of targeted raids throughout their activity in the Har Dov area of Lebanon in order to remove threats to the state of Israel and its citizens. In a somewhat strange but related story, on Monday morning, Hezbollah published a photo of what appears to be the corpse of one of their operatives. Yet according to them, it was a dummy placed by IDF soldiers in the village of Hula in southern Lebanon. The purpose, according to the Hezbollah members as published in the Lebanese media, was to lure the terrorists to the doll in order to collect it. In practice, IDF soldiers were waiting nearby, intending to arrest or harm the terrorists. What can I say? It's been a long war, and we've seen some very strange things as well. However, as long and strange as it's been, it's not over yet. And in Lebanon, it's taken an entirely new direction. That's because last Thursday, the new Lebanese government decided to refuse to allow an Iranian Mahan airplane to depart from Beirut airport because the evening before, IDF Arabic spokesperson's unit, Avichai Aderi, issued a warning that the IDF would act against civilian flights used by Iran to transfer funds to Hezbollah in a clear threat that Israel might act against Beirut airport. Following the Lebanese decision, Iran announced that it would not allow flights departing from Lebanon to land in its territory until permission to land in Beirut is renewed. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report closely on all these issues and bring you new and up-to-date information about what is happening on Israel's northern border. One moment before we proceed with updates from the Gaza Strip and the progress in our hostage release agreement, I'll invite you to help us by sharing the truth. You can do that by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. And most importantly, press that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you can stay tuned to the truth and know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. In an effort to support the people of Israel, Magen David Adom is working tirelessly as the nation's emergency medical team. And for the last 16 months, they've been on the front lines giving first aid to those injured in rocket attacks, terrorism, and everyday accidents. Right now, Israel faces more emergencies than ever. Hospitals and responders are stretched thin, and the need for help is urgent. Magen David Adom cares for everyone, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, from treating injuries to assisting with childbirth. Their life-saving work depends entirely on donations to cover medical supplies and training. So please consider donating at www.savelifeisrael.com. Your support makes a real difference. Thank you. Now, back to the news, and we're shifting our focus to the Gaza Strip. Israel is moving quickly from talk to action, initiating a plan to assist Gazan residents who wish to immigrate outside of the Gaza Strip. The Ministry of Defense has established a directorate for the voluntary immigration of Gaza residents by sea, air, and land to third countries, led by Defense Minister Israel Katz and in coordination with the Coordinator of Government Activities in the Palestinian territories. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Sunday evening at the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations in the United States that President Trump presented a bold new vision and the only plan I think can work in order to allow a different future for the people of Gaza, for the people of Israel, and for the surrounding areas. Why not give Gazans a choice? Everyone said it's the biggest open-air prison in the world, but that's not because of us. We allow people to live. In fact, during the last 2 years, 150,000 Gazans left. They left because they bribed their way out. It wasn't our way. They bribed their way out. The wealthy could leave, but if other people want to leave, give them the choice. Not forced expulsion, not ethnic cleansing. In wars, people live. This is according to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. However, Jordan and Egypt are preparing to present an alternative to Trump's plan. Last week, the Saudi-owned news portal El Arabiya reported that Egypt closed the door on a proposal to allocate land for Gaza residents and insists that Gaza's residents will not be expelled or transferred anywhere else. Instead of Trump's proposals, Cairo proposed 2 plans for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip without moving the residents out. Against this backdrop, Israel is preparing for the conclusion of the first phase of the ceasefire deal and looking ahead to the next phase. In the next 2 weeks, it is expected that the remains of as many as 8 captives who died in Hamas captivity will be returned to Israel, along with 6 more living hostages. And according to the emerging schedule of the phases, next Thursday, 4 sets of remains will be transferred to Israel. On Saturday, 3 or 6 living hostages will be released, and on the following Thursday, 4 more sets of remains will be released. If this coming Saturday only 3 living hostages are released, 3 more will be released the following Saturday. United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff told Fox News this week that the talks will continue and that at a location to be determined later, discussions will be held on how the second phase will successfully conclude. However, at present, there is still no certainty this second phase will even begin. While all of this diplomatic activity is going on, the IDF continues to operate in Gaza. The 162nd Division handed over command of the security zone in the northern Gaza Strip to the 252nd Division on Sunday after operating in Gaza non-stop for 15 straight months. During the fighting, the division lost 265 soldiers and commanders who fell in battle. Alongside the fallen, we embrace the wounded, the fighters who gave their bodies and minds for Israel's security. We cherish their strength, their resolve, and their daily struggle. We will continue to embrace them, and we ask you to continue spreading the truth about all of this by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media, and most importantly, by praying for this situation. And once again, please click on the subscribe button if you haven't already to stay tuned to what's happening here in Israel. Now, we'll shift our focus once again to the hottest sector in the ground for actual fighting by IDF forces. I'm talking about northern Samaria. 2 brothers from Araba planned to carry out a terrorist attack inside Israel this week, but they were stopped by a combined operation by the Israeli police and the Shin Bet. The two had already learned how to make an explosive device and purchased military equipment in preparation for their planned attack, and additional investigations by the Shin Bet and the Central Unit of the Northern District Police show that the two identify with Hamas's terror ideology. They had purchased their military gear in preparation for a confrontation against the State of Israel, and they used instructions that they found on the internet for making crude explosives, which they plan to use in attacks against the security forces of Israel. This is only the latest incident investigated by the Israeli security forces in which Israeli citizens were found to have been radicalized online and inspired to plan terrorist attacks in support of Hamas and other terrorist organizations. As previously reported, last Thursday, another case was allowed for publication in which the Shin Bet and the police thwarted a ramming and shooting attack planned by two Arab-Israeli citizens from Zemer and Kalanswa. And according to the Shin Bet, after a covert investigation by the Shin Bet investigators and the National Investigative Unit, two young men aged 18 to 21, residents of Zemer and Kalanswa, were arrested on suspicion of planning attacks against Israeli civilians and security forces. And meanwhile, in the last 24 hours, in operations by the IDF forces in Judea and Samaria, 13 wanted suspects were arrested. 3 personal weapons were confiscated, and dozens of explosive devices and hundreds of thousands of shekels in cash were seized overnight between Sunday and Monday. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the Judea and Samaria sector. You can remain tuned to the truth in real time by visiting our news website at tbnisrael.com, where you can find a wide range of articles on what's happening in Israel. So stay tuned to the truth. And by the way, Judea and Samaria is right here behind me. We conclude today's report with a look at the troubling situation on Israel's border with Egypt, where the Egyptian army is building up forces in a direct violation of the 1979 Camp David Accords peace treaty. Israel's ambassador to the United States, Yair, spoke Sunday at the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations, saying that Egypt is in a very serious violation of our peace agreement in the Sinai Peninsula. This is an issue that will come up because it's not a tolerable situation. Otherwise, Israel refuses to comment on the overall military buildup of Egypt's army, and in particular on the presence of numerous military forces in Sinai, which contradicts the security appendix of the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. Security and political sources confirmed that many times over the years, Egypt has deployed forces to Sinai in violation of the agreement, and only after the fact requested Israeli approval, which was always granted by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. To give a brief word of explanation, following the Camp David Accords, the Sinai Peninsula was designated as a demilitarized zone. The Americans who sponsored the agreement are also the ultimate guarantors of it. However, over the decades, there have been problems in the Sinai with terrorist groups, especially the Islamic State, ISIS, who overwhelmed the Egyptian civilian police forces stationed there. So Egypt needed to send in heavy infantry forces backed by tanks and helicopters to confront this threat. And once again, the procedure was for Egypt to deploy those forces and then retroactively request permission from Israel to do so. And despite the security annexed in the treaty, this permission was always granted. However, even after the terrorist forces were largely dismantled in the Sinai Peninsula, the Egyptian military forces were not withdrawn as they were supposed to. Now, there is a large Egyptian force deployed in this region with large stocks of weapons and ammunition, far beyond what is needed for anti-terror operations, and also much more than what the peace treaty allows. It started with 2 battalions, and today it stands at tens of thousands of soldiers and dozens of tanks. Some of them are concentrated near the Egyptian Rafah, as well as former ISIS strongholds in the Sinai Peninsula. Additionally, the Egyptian forces have built infrastructure such as bridges, roads, and large tunnels that allow them to move entire divisions into the Sinai Peninsula from the western side of the Suez Canal within hours. There is no rationale for this aside from enabling Egypt to make a move against Israel. The United States Congress is aware of these Egyptian violations and intends to raise the issue with the regime in Cairo. In a clause under internal discussion among Republican members of Congress, it was written that Egypt is fundamentally violating the Camp David Accords by moving forces and deploying tanks into Sinai. This is a strategic threat to Israel's southern border. The clause also calls for examining the economic aid that the United States provides to Egypt. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development with Egypt, and meanwhile, stay tuned to the truth in real time and click on that subscribe button so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Finally, Iran is once again threatening to strike Israel despite the utter failure of their previous attempts. Ali Fadavi, the deputy commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, IRGC, in Iran, said in a fiery speech this week that Iran's next attack on Israel will be carried out at the appropriate time. He also offered criticism on the Gaza ceasefire. As a reminder, following the previous two Iranian attacks that were carried out in April and October 2024 that were involving ballistic missiles and drones that were fired at Israel, in the early hours of October 26, Israeli fighter jets attacked through US-controlled airspace over Iraq, striking military facilities in Iran in retaliation. Those Israeli strikes crippled the Iranian air defense systems and heavily damaged its ability to produce fuel for its missiles and other military equipment. It is also good to remember that United States National Security Advisor Mike Waltz recently said all options are on the table against Iran, and that President Trump is most serious when he says that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, and certainly not on his watch. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development, and we ask you to keep praying for the people of Israel. Pray for the return of the hostages who are being held in the Gaza Strip, and pray that they return safely and in a good health condition to their families. Keep praying for the IDF soldiers wherever they are. I'm talking about Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, Judea and Samaria, and in the air. Pray for the peace of Israel, and most importantly, never forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and together we will win this war because God is on our side.